The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. The radical freedom of having no story is something that is very difficult to conceptualize if you're living in your own ego narrative, which is true for, I would guess, 98% of people on this planet. To certain degrees, right? Like, there are some people who completely believe themselves to be the center of the universe and that everything revolves around them. And to some extent, people move away from this when they become a bit more, emotionally mature. But there's still many, many layers in which you have an identity that tells you that you're supposed to find meaning in this life, that you're supposed to find purpose in this life, that you're supposed to be useful in this life, that you're supposed to be a good person and not a bad person, that you're supposed to, be whatever you're telling yourself you should be. The power of living without a narrative is that you are actually free to be whatever you want, whenever you want. You're not beholden to society. You're not beholden to even, your spouse or your friends. Your own principles are the only thing that, make up what you allow yourself to do and not to do. And the power that comes from this is not just, I can do whatever I want and there's like no morality and I can just, mistreat people and use people, and these things do have a cost. Like, you can do them, but you will suffer some consequences by enacting with ill will to other people. But you can, from your own pure conscious awareness, decide to do whatever you want once you don't have the egoic conditioning anymore that is telling you narratives about who you are. Because if you have a narrative about who you are, then, that this is who you are, how you're supposed to do something different. Like when you watch a movie and you have been following a certain character, you have a certain prediction for what they might do. And if they do something completely opposite to what their character has been built towards, the movie feels jarring, right? Like, this is not in character. This is not how this character is supposed to act. And you do this with yourself as well when you call yourself maybe unproductive or unaligned or not healthy enough or not conscious enough or not productive enough, loving enough. Whatever you're telling yourself you're not enough is kind of your character. And it is the main insecurity then where your egoic mechanisms are trying to protect you from, or where you're trying to overcompensate for. This is what's so tricky, because you might think that somebody who is arrogant, for example, is arrogant because he, thinks too highly about himself. And this is why he's arrogant, right? He's pretending to be something that he's not, because, he's just too high esteemed. But it's completely the opposite. Arrogance is insecurity. It is a deep-rooted insecurity that through a lot of conditioning then becomes the scent of aggrandizement. And it's fake. That's why it's so easy to hurt somebody who is arrogant. It's so easy to insult them or offend them, because deep down there's a wound that is just being overcompensated for. And the way to resolve this arrogance would be for the arrogant person to recognize their own arrogance, recognize how deep it runs, and then suffer all the suffering of the wound that has been dismissed. And this is very unpleasant. And most people, just by the recognition of their own identity delusions, they start to break apart. And then the solution process that comes from this recognizing of how much you've been actually lying to yourself becomes existentially very troubling. Like, you can fall into depression even. You can fall into depression for many years, because suddenly, like, your entire base identity has been invalidated as fake. Like, just imagine how difficult it must be for somebody who, for example, has been a devout Christian for 15 years and then all of a sudden figures out that the church has been lying to them and just using them for money. And yeah, the God that they've believed in was just a complete projection of their own mind. Or imagine somebody who has been a devout Trump supporter for the last 10 years and is in denial about all of the corruption that is going on right now. To open your eyes to how deluded you really are is what is so difficult to do, because you need to actually want it. But once you've seen it, there's not really a way back. Like, if you really have seen the depth of your own delusion, then you start to dissolve, because you cannot hold on to the lie anymore. It's like if you're trying to suppress a feeling that is nagging at you all the time. You think you have control over the feeling when you push it down and suppress it, but sooner or later it will conquer you and it will dissolve you and show you what it needs to show you. The beauty of actually letting it happen and going through the process of seeing the truth of your own identity and finding out what it is that you really want to do, not what other people have told you want to do, not what has been indoctrinated like as shoulds in your mind, then at the end of it, you notice what actual freedom really means. It means that I am not ashamed of showing my true self to other people. I can be ridiculous and arrogant or humble and devoted. I can be whatever I want to be, because there's nothing holding me back. It's always the ego that is holding one back, because it is telling you how you're supposed to act and what you're supposed to be. And the freedom is not just in action, but in psychological well-being, even when you're alone. When there's truly no narrative going on, then there's not this need to be anything but what you are. Like, there might be a narrative, for example, of let's just take an incel, for example, who has never had an intimate relationship. Now, there's this huge identity cluster in the mind that says that, this person is like a failure, or not worthy in the eyes of society, or it's kind of embarrassing. And all of the stuff, it seems quite real, because depending on what social circle you're in, it gets validated, because everybody is living in the same delusion. Everybody is creating the illusion that, you're supposed to be a Giga-Chad and be with a ton of, sleep around with a ton of people. And if you don't, well, then you're being looked down upon in this social group. And all of this is true as long as you believe in what the social group believes. Now you're getting embedded into their illusions. And to a certain extent, this is a pattern that has been constructed over many, many years. And to notice that it truly doesn't matter with how many people you've slept with and what other people think about, what you do with your genitals. It becomes quite silly how much we play up this game. And this is one example out of truly infinite examples. Career-wise, this happens all the time, where, you might be unemployed, and because you're unemployed, you feel like you're a failure in life, or it's like your fourth business, and every business of you starts to fail, and therefore you see yourself as like failure character who has to struggle to finally find the business that works out. Like, all of these narratives, they might seem like even noble to some extent, or some like hero's journey where you need to overcome the struggles and finally reach some sort of destination. But what are you really doing when you think about life in this way? Like, you're constructing a story, you're making something up in your mind, and often it requires some time in nature, time in silence, or just chilling with some animals to notice, wow, I'm a human and I'm making all of this stuff up. None of this is real. It is completely imaginary. And it's not as easy as saying it is all imaginary, so I am not, like, I don't have to care, or I'm not supposed to care, which there's again where it starts, right? I'm not supposed to care about being an incel, or I'm not supposed to care about having failed in my business. I am more spiritual than that. I've been so advanced at this point that, I actually don't care about suffering anymore. Like, that's what's so tricky about it, because it moves in all directions. The spiritual identity of being somebody who now doesn't care about your own ego, or doesn't care about your own awareness, ego awareness, or whatever it might be, right? Like, this is still the same narrative. It might actually be a worse one if you really start to believe in a spiritual identity. Like, I know people that have been so immersed into the idea that they are conscious awareness and that they are consciousness, that it is the new belief in God and it's the new religion, and to not be identified with it is kind of the same as, noticing that it might not actually be true in the way you want it to be. Because the way the ego wants it to be is in a way that it doesn't have to dissolve. It doesn't have to disappear into this flux of sensations, of this emptiness that doesn't really hold one clear narrative. Now, just because there aren't any narratives and you can dissolve your sense of self, it doesn't mean that there is no truth. It doesn't mean that there's no objective truth out there. If there wasn't, then this video would be quite pointless. There would be no dissolution towards anything, because what would you awaken towards if there is no dream state and there's no reality? Like, there needs to be some sort of distinction in even in a non-dual world. And people get very hung up on this, because on both hands you have like this non-dual framework of everything is one and existence is like the sense of infinite oneness. And at the same time, there are clearly differences. There are clearly different objects, different concepts, different meanings. Distinctions exist. That's how any of this is possible at all. And the dissolution process is time and time again accepting how a lot of these distinctions are true, how much about your own identity is true. And moving through this process is what I facilitate for people. It is difficult to dissolve your sense of self if you don't even know where it lies. If you think that you are like some sort of semi-enlightened being or whatever, and everything is perfect already, then of course more power to you if you actually feel that way. But if you then notice that there's still things that you reject about yourself, or reject about your life, or reject about experience, well, then there's more to dissolve and more to see about what is actually true. And I help people with that through my ego architecture audit, where I analyze people's egos. And it's really a fun process. I had this idea for the service actually 1 year ago, or 1.5 years ago, where I thought, wouldn't it be funny to have a service where people pay you to analyze their own egos and actually do it in a way that serves them? Because people don't talk about it in this way. And it's always so dressed up with so much mysticism, when this mysticism doesn't need to be there. It's there experientially when you actually move through the dissolution process, and then it's not just fun and games, right? It's like the real deal. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is language trying to capture something that cannot really be captured. Qualia and sensations are like kind of magic. And that's also why this dissolution process is so intense for people, because you notice that you cannot use your own intellect anymore to protect you from what you have to experience. You cannot protect yourself from life. Life is there to be lived. And once you truly have removed most of your narratives, you don't even need to eliminate all of your narratives, but when you remove most of your egoic narratives, life feels so much easier. You cannot understand, if you haven't truly seen, how much of people's suffering is really just stories that they tell themselves that conflict with what other people perceive of them, or what their parents perceive of them, or what another part of your mind perceives of you. Right? It's always a conflict with something. Because an interesting story usually has conflict. It has something to fight against, to rub against. And then to notice that it is this friction between wanting the story to pan out in one way, have an expectation for how your life is supposed to be or who you're supposed to be, and then brushing up against the reality of how it actually is like, it constantly is putting us into this overthinking mode, trying to make it into something that it just isn't. And the amount of pain that comes from this constant overanalyzing, there's just no words to describe it. And from this point, it is also, unbelievable of how liberating it is to see that it's all an utter delusion.